want to get to something, B, because before Shafe made me mad yesterday, I really was in lockstep with him about um the intensity and the answers, and kind of you got to see Coach Butler in all his glory. I felt the other day when he took the podium. What was kind of your vibe? He talked about Sorsby and it was intense. He talked about
Mhm.
the front seven and how you need to play good defense, and it was intense. I felt like he almost had to rein it in. I that was a good embodiment of what I think his competitive juices are.
Yeah, I would say so. You could tell with everybody over there we had switched to
Yeah,
it's
even
on
Coach
now.
Rule was a little crabby
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yeah, it was 11th hour stuff, which I like. I like when that mood's in the air. And I think you want that. You like that sort of focus. And yeah, I mean, when John Butler was talking about Sorsby, the thing I guess that stood out was the respect he had for, yes, he's a runner, but he's also a physical guy. Like he put emphasis on, he'll put the hit on you as opposed to you putting the hit on him, or at least that's in his body of work. So you got to know that he's going to be a guy who's not afraid to be a physical runner when he takes off. I thought the other interesting part of this game really is we do a know the foe type thing with the Cincinnati writer. And last year, one of the things he stressed with the offense was that was a group where everything had to be like 10, 11, 12 play drives. And that's good when you can do it consistently, but it can be tough to live that way. And if you look at what they did in the portal, they completely revamped that receiver group
Mm.
with Cyrus Allen, Jeff Caldwell, Caleb Goody. Those are some of the main names to know. And you heard Butler at the end talk about, those guys obviously have speed. You hope your guys in the secondary can run with them, but I fully expect Cincinnati to test that out early to see if they can get some explosives in the pass game with those guys, and bring an element that didn't show up on their tape from last year because they have those type of weapons. They made a concerted effort to go get those type of guys, I think, to bring more of those 20-yard pass plays into the equation. So that's going to be an interesting chess match. And I thought that was just interesting as you think about a coordinator. It's always uh, a job where you got to have a some kind of great man mentality to handle like adjusting like in the first quarter on any given week, but especially like the first game of the season where in this portal era, that's really interesting to me on both sides of the ball, how coordinators have to play that chess match, 10, 12 minutes into the game. You've seen a couple series. You're starting to see how they use certain guys that you've read about or you've watched film about from at other stops, and now they're wearing this uniform. I just think that's one of the unique things about the first week, and also combined with just the era we're living in college football, where there's so many new faces for both sides at different spots sometimes.
Yeah, I'm a total sicko, BC, and I could feel his intensity. He talked about Coach Butler going first and Sorsby feeling it early and doing the dictating when it comes to getting him to the ground. And I couldn't help but to think, and he talked about hunting. And he said,
Yeah.
if you will, like we do these t-shirt, like I love the terminology. Like it fits my, as Ravi would say, my serial killer personality. It's not that, but there is something about stalking, tracking, and just neutralizing prey. I'm watching his body language, and it's like if his team remotely thinks like this, as much as he's into physicality and tackling and good get off, like he's given them a chance just emotionally
Mhm.
before they even take the field. Like not even getting to the physical part yet.
Yeah. You know what's also come across a lot this camp to me is how much you kind of knew it because you had heard the story about how some guys, especially in the secondary, went to bat for John Butler when they were when Rule was deciding the DC. But they really do I think love his personality and just like how he is, chopping up the game and the ideas he has that are going to come to the table. So I don't know if you did that old, radio streaming question of like which side of the ball are you most interested to see, all of it. But in a way, like I've kind of come to the point where I'm enthusiastic to see this defense and exactly what it looks like, how they rotate these different parts, and some of these guys who, I mean, it's a fascinating group. Like Jalen George was in a green jersey until a couple weeks ago. He's fighting for a black shirt now.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about some of this stuff. Marquez Watson-Trent is a guy who just popped into the program. Great culture guy. You can tell he's a pro's pro when he's at the podium. Has
Speaking of
three.
ill will, does he looks like he's kind of about that life, right? I mean, he didn't look like a
Yeah.
super nice. He didn't look like a super nice guy.
Who you talking about?
Law firm, Watson
Watson-Trent.
Trent.
Oh yeah. I mean, with 363 tackles, and he enters the equation and just what he brings, and then McCullough. So, how John Butler organizes those parts, how much they rotate. Donovan Jones is popping up as a third corner, and them kind of confirming that. All that stuff is really interesting to me because I think it's been the group where it's maybe been the hardest to kind of get a hold on what they're going to do. And that's what makes it so exciting going into the first game. And I do think it's going to come down to a lot of these first week games across the country, who can play the most like they do on Tuesday. I mean, I think it's always like that sort of in the season. Like, just can you be the guy you're giving me on a Tuesday with where it's you're doing the routine stuff. You're not getting outside of yourself because the cameras are on and all that. But I think especially in the first week, that's critical.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson, Husker247. BC, there's been a kind of a lot going on here recently, whether it's the single-digit numbers, the black shirts, the captains. But I do find it fascinating that seemingly the place that we have the most question marks is represented obviously very well, both in the captains, the single digits, and then the black shirts are on defense. But does that say anything to you about how they feel about their defense, or have you not really read that far into it?
I don't know if I've read that far into it, but I do think there's just a lot of guys who, when you think about, like, you have 4 or 5 returning guys in the secondary who have a lot of experience, who know what the culture is supposed to be, and I think are good at setting it. Like Marquise Buford is a good example of that. But then they really did add portal guys who just can fit in well as being professionals about how they handle their business. And I truly do think they got to the point before even the first game, which is not easy to do, where those guys they're Huskers, like they're all Huskers. And that it sounds like, well, that should be obvious, but I do think there's probably some programs where there's guys who come in from the portal. And at this point, until you play some games, until you're really in the fire, maybe there's still a little bit of that dynamic of, well, I've been in this program for 2 or 3 years. This guy just got here. I don't sense that at all. And that on the defense is probably one of the best things I feel good about going into the opener, is that sort of chemistry of how they've merged lanes with those guys who have been around, and then the guys who are new, who are going to be critical.
BC, if you're looking at, we talked about Holgerson and Raiola and the intrigue with the D line and the experience back in and defense. How excited are you to see special teams as it relates to how Nebraska wants to do business in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I'm as enthusiastic about that as the other phases too. I mean, it's just I think last week you asked a question about special teams, and I talked about the return game, and there's that part where Eckler said we want to lead the country in return attempts, which in itself, forget like what their actual results are. That's going to be a dramatic contrast if they're close to that from what we've seen in the past, that sort of aggression. But I'm just as much eager to see guys who maybe they're on the second line on the depth chart now. Maybe there's a couple guys who aren't even on that too deep. Their name's not on there. I don't know, who are on those core units or are on a couple of those coverage units. And can they stamp their personality into this team through special teams, and it becomes a real thing in this program where I want to be on those units, especially if I'm a young guy, because I know this is how I'm going to elevate myself and I'm going to change the game. And so I think you're really hopeful that on Friday morning, we're talking about a guy or two who maybe we haven't even had in our conversations much, who pops up on special teams, does something, and you're like, oh, you got to write a sidebar to spend a minute or two on him. And his confidence is growing. And the fact that he made a play and is getting some pub for it and impacted the game, hopefully that feeds the rest of the room. Like, I want in on that too. So I think that's going to be a big deal if they can kind of establish that from the outset.
BC, is there I feel like we've asked all of our guests this the last week, but I find the different answers fascinating. Is there a phase or a player or a position group of the game that you're most excited about, that you just like want to
from a fan or
just from like a consuming football
gotcha.
Perspective, where like maybe take off your Nebraska media hat for a second and you're just like, I'm kind of excited to see what this looks like?
I really think it's, as much as we've talked about the upgrade possibilities at wide receiver, to actually see it happen on the field would be, I think, as exciting as anything for the fans. And I'm talking about, like, you're in the red zone Thursday night and Isaiah Hunter goes and gets it or something, on a 50-50, or, there's a Dane Key, you like see that experience. And it's like, everybody's heard all offseason. He's a great culture guy. He's great, like, leading that room. But then you see it on a 3rd and 5 where it's just like, okay, he's a money guy for Dylan in those situations. And so I do believe they've developed a good chemistry. I think Barney's ready to roll. And obviously Bonner's the guy everyone always overlooks, who's going to play a lot of snaps because he's so physical. He's going to be important. But those guys, and just, I think, to your question, it's a good one, Ravi, because a lot of times I don't see the game as thoroughly as like Damon does, like some of the inside baseball stuff that happens. And that's okay. But I think there's that surface level stuff that will pop out or not pop out in a first game. And if you're talking about a topic like that, I think wide receiver would be like 1A almost on that list, just because it's something you can grab. Everybody can grab that, like, okay, that was different or it wasn't. So I think I'd go there.
Full disclosure, I don't see the game that clearly either.
Oh, I think you do.
That's because you need glass. That's all.
See, just no friends, man. I'm beginning to think it's me, BC.
I just complimented you there. Right? I gave you a big fat compliment.
Listen, if you're not going to take compliments, then I'm going to pile on your own insults.
That's
my mom always said, take a compliment and run with it. So
Ryan, man, Ryan. B, let me ask you something about this offensive line and versatility, or at least options. If it was quarterback and they were still deciding, I would probably be concerned. But I think given that they have interior options, whether it's the final black shirt or a starting spot at tackle, I'm encouraged, primarily because as a player, I want to know that all my work matters and I can affect the outcome at all times, right? Like, in this weird sort of way, it's freeing as a player to know you're always in the hunt and you need to stay sharp. I get maybe from the fan perspective, it's but do you allow yourself to look at the competition down to the wire as a positive from a media standpoint?
Yeah, I actually do think it's a positive. Like, I think Keona Davis has set himself up to be a really solid player. The fact that Jalen George, as I said earlier, who's in a green jersey up until a couple of weeks ago, has put in the work behind the scenes to be ready when he was full go to challenge for a black shirt. I think that's huge because, like, back in the spring when he was out, I was like, man, that's a bummer, because I really feel like he's one of those guys you need to fill out that depth and all that stuff. And so the idea that he's like in the mix, I think, is good. And then on the offensive line, I've always said, I mean, they have enough proven guys there who have played snaps that whoever wins it is going to have earned it. And so it's not a deal where they're going to fall back into that job. Whoever's up first will have grabbed it. And I think that's all you can ask for. And then, I mean, you can look on both sides of the ball. You have that sort of thing going on. There's not an or by it, but I think some people are a little surprised because we talked so much about Riley Van Poppel during the offseason for good reason that he was like second on the line behind Judy. It's guys like Judy. If you want to be an elite program in college football, you have to have those cases every year where there's a player like Elijah Judy who maybe people capped off where they thought he could get to like already at this point. And he's ideally going to show, no, that wasn't true. Like, this is why I won that starting job. And in my last year, I give you a little something extra. And then Van Poppel contributes what people maybe expected all along with him. And so I don't view that as a bad thing at all, because I think we're talking about guys that like Keona Davis, Van Pop, and some of these tackles. You're like, I feel pretty good if he trots out there about what he could maybe do. And so that someone's pushing him or is even a little in front of him right now, I wouldn't sweat that. I'd look at that as that's the sort of competition we've been begging to see around these parts for a good while. So let's not get too upset about it when it's actually happening.
BC, last thing from me here. As we got just a couple minutes left, I've been putting everybody's feet to the fire. That's my job this week. I need a win total out of you.
I've been in that boring category that has 8-4, then they'll get to 9-4 in the bowl game. And I know that's like a fence sitting prediction. I thought my colleague Schaefer, we did something the other day, and I have kind of said this before too. And so I do agree with it, even though I say that. And so that's what I'm going to say to you: 8-4, then 9-4 in the bowl game. But there's that part of me that actually thinks when Nebraska breaks down the door and has that season, it's going to be like, they break that thing down. Like it goes from like that jump where you're in that 10-win category. So it would not surprise me if it's one or the other. Like if we're talking about like a 9-3, 10-2 type team, or, it goes the other way and they can't quite get over the hump and it's 7-5 still. So that's why I think a lot of people say, well, I'll just pick the one in the middle, then hit the one in the middle, as they say in Rocky IV with Drago. So that's what people are doing, I think. But I leave that's why this season is awesome, because it can go a lot of different ways. It's awesome because everybody says Penn State's the best team in the Big Ten and they're ranked second or third, first in the country. And I think even they're gettable to somebody on a given day. And I think that's what, just not the Nebraska season, but this college football season, there's a lot of openings for somebody to make a move, and Nebraska, I think, feels like they've got a chance. They're a confident team, no question about it. So now you just got to go back it up what you think you are.
That's our guy, Brian Christopherson, Husker247 BC. Appreciate the time as always, and enjoy the game tomorrow.
Safe travels, B Sizzle.
Yeah, see you there. Thanks, guys.